I spent 17 years building my father-in-law's company into a $75 million empire. At a family dinner, my wife smiled and said, "Your replacement starts Monday." They thought I was just another employee they could discard. They had no idea I owned the patents to everything that made the company valuable. The next morning, I walked into that boardroom and destroyed their lives in 10 minutes. Let me start from the beginning, the way a man should when he's about to tell you how he learned the hardest lesson of his life. My name is Tyler Thompson. I'm 47 years old, and I poured my blood, sweat, and soul into transforming Davis Smart Systems from a two-man operation in Bill's garage into a multi-million-dollar empire. When I married Nicole 20 years ago, her father's company was struggling to install basic security cameras and garage door openers. By last month, we were designing and implementing complete home automation systems for millionaires across 3 states. I built that empire. Not Bill Davis, not his precious daughter, and certainly not the smooth-talking replacement they had waiting in the wings. Me. Every client we landed, every contract we signed, every technological breakthrough that put us ahead of our competitors. That was my work. I spent weekends learning new programming languages while Bill played golf. I pulled all-nighters troubleshooting systems while Nicole attended charity galas. I missed family barbecues, skipped vacations, and sacrificed my own comfort to make sure Davis Smart Systems became synonymous with excellence. The irony wasn't lost on me that I had spent 17 years making other people rich while convincing myself I was building something for my own future. Bill always talked about legacy, about keeping the business in the family. I thought that meant something. I thought being his son-in-law, being the man who had given everything to his company, made me family. I was wrong. The truth hit me like a freight train that Tuesday evening in November. Nicole and I were sitting at Bill's mahogany dining table, the same table where we'd celebrated contract victories and holiday dinners for nearly 2 decades. The conversation started innocently enough, talk about quarterly projections and upcoming installations. Then Bill cleared his throat in that way he did when he was about to make an announcement. Nicole's hand found mine across the table, and for a split second, I thought she was offering comfort. Instead, she was saying goodbye. Bill Davis looked me straight in the eye and delivered the words that would change everything. "Tyler, your wife's new husband will be taking over the company operations moving forward." The room went silent, except for the ticking of that antique grandfather clock in the corner. Nicole squeezed my hand, but not in solidarity. It was more like a pat on the head you'd give a dog before putting it down. That night, I learned that loyalty was a one-way street, and I've been driving in the wrong direction for 17 years. I've replayed that dinner conversation 1,000 times in my head, analyzing every word, every gesture, every calculated pause. What struck me most wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how rehearsed it all seemed, like they'd been practicing this moment for months. After Bill dropped his bombshell about my replacement, the silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears while I processed what I just heard. Nicole was still holding my hand, but her grip had turned cold and mechanical. "Tyler," Nicole finally spoke, her voice steady and controlled. "We know this comes as a surprise, but it's what's best for the company's future." I turned to look at my wife of 20 years. This woman who'd shared my bed, my dreams, my struggles to build something meaningful. Her expression was neutral, almost businesslike, as if we were discussing quarterly reports instead of dismantling my entire life. "Best for the company?" I asked, keeping my voice level despite the rage building inside me. "The company I built from the ground up? The company that wouldn't exist without me." Bill leaned forward, adopting that patronizing tone he used when he wanted to sound reasonable. "Tyler, you've done excellent work, don't get me wrong. But it's time for fresh leadership, someone who can take us to the next level." That's when he walked in, Brandon Mills. Mid-30s, expensive suit, confident smile that screamed, "I've already won." He moved through Bill's house like he owned it, which apparently he soon would. "Sorry I'm late," Brandon said, extending his hand toward me like we were old friends meeting for drinks. Traffic was brutal coming from downtown. I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I studied his face, looking for any sign of discomfort or shame. There was none. This man was walking into my life, ready to take everything I'd built, and he seemed genuinely pleased about it. Brandon has extensive experience in technology integration, Nicole explained, finally releasing my hand. He's worked with several Fortune 500 companies on similar automation projects. Similar projects, I repeated slowly. You mean like the $75 million business I've been running for the past 17 years? Bill's jaw tightened slightly. Tyler, there's no need to be difficult about this. We're offering you a generous severance package and excellent references. A severance package. For my own company. For the business I bled for. Brandon finally spoke up, his voice smooth and practiced. Tyler, I've reviewed your work extensively. You've built something impressive here. I'm hoping we can work together during the transition to ensure everything runs smoothly. The audacity was breathtaking. This stranger was asking me to train my own replacement, to hand over my client relationships and trade secrets with a smile. I stood up slowly, placing my napkin on the table with deliberate precision. When does this transition begin? Monday morning, Bill replied without hesitation. For days. They were giving me 4 days to accept that my life's work was being handed to someone else. I looked around the table one more time, at Bill's satisfied expression, at Nicole's carefully neutral face, at Brandon's confident smirk. The next morning would indeed change everything, but not in the way they expected. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my home office, surrounded by 17 years of contracts, legal documents, and corporate filings that most people would find mind-numbingly boring. But these papers weren't just paperwork to me. They were ammunition. While Nicole slept peacefully upstairs, probably dreaming about her new life with Brandon, I methodically went through every document that mattered. Partnership agreements, shareholder contracts, intellectual property filings, client retention clauses, everything I'd been smart enough to secure over the years when Bill was too focused on the big picture to pay attention to details. By 3 a.m, I found what I was looking for. Buried in a contract amendment from 8 years ago was my insurance policy, a clause that gave me controlling interest in any technology patents developed under my direct supervision. Every smart home system we designed, every proprietary software solution, every innovative security protocol that made Davis Smart Systems worth $75 million. It all belonged to me. Bill had signed it without reading it carefully, trusting his son-in-law to handle the legal complexities. Back then, I told myself it was just good business practice. Now, I realized it was the key to everything. I pulled up our client database and began making notes. Marcus Chun, our biggest residential client, with a $15 million smart mansion project. Sarah Williams, who trusted us with automating her entire luxury hotel chain. The Morrison family, whose high-security compound required our most advanced systems. Every single one of them had contracts that specified my personal involvement as a requirement for service continuation. My phone buzzed around 4 a.m. A text from Nicole. Are you coming to bed? I typed back. Working on the transition documents. Don't wait up. It wasn't entirely a lie. I was working on a transition, just not the one they expected. By sunrise, I had my strategy mapped out. Bill and Brandon thought they were inheriting a company. What they were actually getting was an empty shell. The real value of Davis Smart Systems walked out the door with me, and I was about to make sure they understood that. I showered, put on my best suit, and prepared for the most important day of my professional life. As I drove to the office, I couldn't help but smile. Nicole and her father had taught me an important lesson about loyalty. Now I was going to teach them one about consequences. The next morning had indeed changed everything, but not for the reasons they thought. I arrived at the office before 7 a.m., 2 hours before a usual staff meeting. The building was quiet, giving me time to prepare for what would either be the greatest professional victory of my life or complete career suicide. Given what I discovered in those contracts, I was betting on victory. My assistant, Jennifer, arrived at her usual time and immediately sensed something was different. Tyler, Jennifer said, setting down her coffee, you look like a man with a plan. That's because I am, I replied, handing her a thick folder. I need you to schedule an emergency board meeting for 10 a.m. Full attendance required. Jennifer raised an eyebrow, but didn't question me. She'd worked with me for 12 years and knew I didn't make dramatic moves without good reason. At 9:30, Bill, Nicole, and Brandon walked into the conference room looking relaxed and confident. They probably expected a smooth handover ceremony where I'd gracefully accept my fate and wish everyone well. Tyler, Bill said, settling into his usual chair at the head of the table. I'm glad you're being professional about this transition. Oh, I'm being very professional, I replied, connecting my laptop to the main display screen. Brandon looked around the conference room with obvious satisfaction, probably already planning how he'd redecorate my office. Tyler, I want you to know how much I respect what you've built here. I hope we can maintain some of the client relationships you've developed. That's interesting, Brandon, I said, pulling up the first document on the screen. Because according to this intellectual property agreement, you can't maintain anything without my direct authorization. The room went silent. Bill leaned forward, squinting at the screen. What are you talking about? Nicole asked, her voice sharp with concern. I clicked to the next slide, showing the patent registrations. Every smart home system we've installed, every piece of proprietary software, every security protocol that makes this company valuable, it's all registered under my name, with my signature under my direct supervision. Bill's face started turning red. That's impossible. I signed all the corporate documents. You signed the general partnership papers, I agreed. But you never read the intellectual property clauses. This company doesn't own its own technology, Bill. I do. Brandon stood up abruptly, his confident demeanor faltering. There has to be some mistake. No mistake, I said calmly. And here's the beautiful part. Every major client contract specifically requires my personal involvement for system maintenance and upgrades. Without me, you have a company name and some office furniture. The actual business walks out when I do. Nicole stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. Tyler, you can't be serious about this. I met her gaze steadily. Dead serious. You wanted to replace me? Go ahead. But you'll be replacing me with an empty shell. The emergency board meeting I'd called was scheduled for 10 a.m., but by 9:45, word had already spread through the building like wildfire. I could see employees gathering in small groups, whispering about what was happening in the conference room. When the full board assembled, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Bill sat at his usual spot, but his confident demeanor from earlier had evaporated. Nicole kept checking her phone, probably texting Brandon for damage control advice. Our 5 board members looked confused and concerned. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, standing at the presentation screen. I've called this meeting to clarify some important legal matters regarding company operations. Board member Margaret Chen raised her hand. Tyler, Bill mentioned there would be a leadership transition announcement today. That's exactly what we're here to discuss, I replied, clicking to my first slide. The question is whether such a transition is legally possible. I walked them through the intellectual property agreements, the client contracts, and the operational requirements that tied the company's value directly to my involvement. With each document I displayed, I watched the board members' expressions shift from confusion to understanding to concern. What you're telling us, said board member David Rodriguez slowly, is that Davis Smart Systems can't function without your direct participation. That's correct, I confirmed. Every major revenue stream requires my personal authorization or involvement. Bill finally spoke up, his voice strained. Tyler, surely we can work out some kind of arrangement. What kind of arrangement did you have in mind, Bill? I asked calmly. The same kind where you hand my life's work to a stranger and expect me to train my replacement? Brandon, who'd been silent throughout the presentation, finally stood up. This is ridiculous. No one person can hold an entire company hostage. I turned to face him directly. I'm not holding anything hostage, Brandon. I'm simply explaining the legal reality of the situation. If you want to run Davis Smart Systems, you need to understand what you're actually taking on. Margaret Chun cleared her throat. Tyler, what are you proposing? I'm proposing that any leadership changes be postponed until we can restructure these agreements, I said. Or alternatively, the board can proceed with the current plan and watch the company's value disappear overnight. The silence that followed was deafening. Nicole was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. I need to make some phone calls, Bill muttered, standing abruptly. Of course you do, I replied. Take all the time you need. But remember, every day you delay costs us potential client relationships. As the room began to empty, I remained seated, watching my carefully constructed plan unfold exactly as I'd anticipated. After the board meeting dissolved into chaos, I returned to my office to find Nicole waiting for me. She was sitting in the chair across from my desk, her posture rigid with barely controlled frustration. Tyler, Nicole said as I closed the door behind me, we need to talk. I thought we already talked, I replied, settling into my chair. Last night at dinner, remember? When you and your father decided my future without consulting me. Nicole's jaw tightened. You're being childish about this. Brandon is qualified to run the technical operations. Is he? I asked, leaning back in my chair. Tell me, Nicole, what happens when Marcus Chen calls about his mansion security upgrade next week? Will Brandon know that Chen requires all programming to be done on-site because he doesn't trust remote access? Will he remember that Sarah Williams needs her hotel systems updated during specific maintenance windows to avoid guest disruptions? Nicole shifted uncomfortably. He can learn those details. He can try, I agreed. But our clients didn't sign contracts with Brandon. They signed contracts with me. And according to those contracts, they have the right to terminate service if I'm no longer directly involved. Nicole stood up and began pacing. Tyler, this doesn't have to be a war. We can find a way to make this work for everyone. Really? I asked. Like the way you found a way to tell me about your new husband? How long have you been planning this, Nicole? 6 months? A year? She stopped pacing and turned to face me. It's not what you think. Then explain it to me, I said quietly. Explain how the woman I've been married to for 20 years decided I was disposable. Nicole's composure finally began to break. You think this is easy for me? You think I wanted things to end up this way? I think you wanted the lifestyle my success provided without having to deal with the man who provided it, I replied. And I think you found someone younger and more exciting to give you that lifestyle. That's not fair, Nicole protested. Fair? I laughed without humor. You want to talk about fair? I spent 17 years building something magnificent, and you're handing it to a stranger like it belongs to you. Nicole sat back down, her voice taking on a pleading tone. Tyler, please. We can work this out. Maybe there's a way for you to stay involved. Work with Brandon to ensure a smooth transition. I studied her face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse or recognition of what she'd done. Instead, I saw desperation and calculation. No, Nicole, I said finally. There's no going back from this. You made your choice, and now you get to live with the consequences. As she left my office, I realized that this conversation had been more valuable than any contract or legal document. It had confirmed what I'd suspected all along. Nicole had never really understood what I'd built, and she certainly didn't understand what she was about to lose. By Thursday afternoon, my investigation into Davis Smart Systems' financial records had uncovered something that would change everything. I'd spent the previous evening digging through expense reports and account transfers, looking for any additional leverage I might need. What I found was far more damaging than I'd expected. I called Jennifer into my office and handed her a thick folder. Jennifer, I said, I need you to schedule another emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. And this time, I want our accountant present. Jennifer looked at the folder contents, and her eyes widened. Tyler, are these what I think they are? Unauthorized fund transfers, inflated expense reports, and what appears to be systematic embezzlement. I confirmed. Bill's been skimming money from the company for years. The documents told a clear story. Over the past 5 years, Bill had been redirecting company funds through fake consulting fees, phantom vendor payments, and mysterious executive expenses that had no supporting documentation. The total amount was staggering, nearly $2 million that should have been company profit. How did you find this? Jennifer asked, still staring at the papers. I've been reviewing all financial authorizations from the past decade. I explained. As operational manager, I signed off on most legitimate expenses. These transactions bypassed my approval entirely. Friday morning's board meeting had a completely different atmosphere. Bill walked in looking confident, probably thinking he'd found a way to force me out overnight. Brandon was with him, carrying a briefcase and wearing an expensive suit that screamed new management. Before we discuss any personnel changes, I announced, I think the board should review some interesting financial discrepancies I've discovered. Bill's confident expression faltered slightly. Tyler, what are you talking about? I connected my laptop to the display screen and pulled up the first document. I'm talking about $2 million in unauthorized fund transfers that bear your electronic signature, Bill. The room went dead silent. Margaret Chen leaned forward, studying the screen intently. These are company funds that were redirected to personal accounts. I continued, clicking through the evidence. Fake consulting payments, inflated travel expenses, phantom vendor contracts. Brandon looked genuinely shocked. Mr. Davis, what is he talking about? Bill's face had turned ashen. Tyler, there has to be some explanation for this. Oh, there's an explanation, I replied calmly. You've been stealing from the company you wanted to hand over to your daughter's new husband. David Rodriguez, our board treasurer, was frantically taking notes. Tyler, are you suggesting that Bill has been embezzling company funds? I'm not suggesting anything, I said. I'm presenting documented evidence of systematic financial misconduct. The mood in the room had shifted completely. What started as a meeting about leadership transition had become an investigation into corporate fraud. Nicole sat frozen in her chair, staring at her father like she'd never seen him before. This changes everything, Margaretchen said quietly. Yes, I agreed, it does. The aftermath of revealing Bill's embezzlement was swift and decisive. Within hours, the board had voted to suspend him from all company operations, pending a full financial audit. Brandon quietly disappeared, probably realizing that hitching his wagon to a corrupt businessman wasn't the career move he'd anticipated. Nicole tried to salvage the situation, but the damage was irreversible. Tyler, Nicole said during our final private conversation, surely we can work something out. My father made mistakes, but the company can survive this. The company will survive, I agreed. Under my leadership, your father's mistakes, as you call them, have disqualified him from any role in Davis Smart Systems. And what about us? Nicole asked, her voice barely a whisper. I looked at the woman I'd been married to for 20 years, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. There is no us, Nicole. There hasn't been for a while. I was just too busy building our future to notice you'd already abandoned it. The board meeting that afternoon was purely ceremonial. By unanimous vote, I was appointed CEO and majority shareholder of Davis Smart Systems. Bill's shares were frozen pending the criminal investigation, and Nicole's shares were insignificant compared to my controlling interest. Tyler, Margaretchen said as the meeting concluded, we owe you an apology. We should have recognized your value to this company long ago. Recognition isn't necessary, I replied. Results are what matter, and I intend to keep delivering them. That evening, I stood in my new corner office, the one that had belonged to Bill Davis for 30 years. The nameplate on the door now read, Tyler Thompson, CEO. The view from the window showed the city where I'd built my empire, one smart home at a time. My phone buzzed with a text from Nicole. I'm sorry for everything. Can we talk? I deleted the message without responding. Some bridges were meant to be burned. Jennifer knocked on the door frame. Tyler, the Chin Mansion project team, is asking about Monday's installation schedule. Tell them everything proceeds as planned, I said. Davis Smart Systems is under new management, but our commitment to excellence remains unchanged. As Jennifer left, I realized that revenge wasn't about destroying your enemies. It was about building something so strong that their betrayal became irrelevant. Davis Smart Systems was worth $75 million when they tried to take it from me. Under my sole leadership, it would be worth twice that within 5 years. Bill Davis had taught me an important lesson about trust. Now I was going to teach the business world a lesson about what happened when you underestimated Tyler Thompson. The next morning had indeed changed everything, just not in the way they'd expected. 6 months after the boardroom confrontation that changed everything, Davis Smart Systems had become the undisputed leader in luxury home automation on the East Coast. Without Bill's interference and embezzlement, our profit margins had increased by 40%, and we'd expanded into 2 new states. I was reviewing quarterly reports when Jennifer knocked on my office door. Tyler, Jennifer said, there's someone here to see you. Says it's personal. Nicole walked into my office looking nothing like the confident woman who'd sat at that dinner table planning my replacement. She was thinner, tired, and wearing clothes that suggested her financial situation had changed dramatically. Tyler, Nicole said, remaining standing since I hadn't invited her to sit. I know I have no right to be here, but I need to say something. You have 5 minutes, I replied, not looking up from my reports. I was wrong, Nicole said, her voice barely above a whisper. About everything. About you, about us, about what was important. I finally looked up at her. Nicole, what exactly do you want? I want to know if there's any chance we could try again, she said. I've learned a lot about myself over the past 6 months, and I realize what I lost when I lost you. I leaned back in my chair, studying the woman I'd once loved. What you lost, Nicole, was the man who built your comfortable life while you took it for granted. What you gained was the lesson that actions have consequences. Tyler, please, Nicole pleaded. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but we had 20 years together. That has to count for something. 20 years, I repeated, during which you never once stood up for me against your father's decisions. 20 years where you enjoyed the lifestyle my work provided while planning to hand my company to another man. Nicole's eyes filled with tears. I can't change what I did, but I can promise it would never happen again. You're right, I agreed. It would never happen again because I would never trust you again. And a marriage without trust isn't a marriage at all. So that's it, Nicole asked. 20 years means nothing. 20 years taught me everything I needed to know about your character, I replied. When things got difficult, when you had to choose between loyalty and convenience, you chose convenience. That's not the kind of partner I need in my life. As Nicole left my office for the last time, I felt nothing but relief. Some chapters in life needed to end completely before better ones could begin. 1 year after the night that changed everything, I stood in the penthouse office of the new Davis Smart Systems headquarters. Looking out over the city, I'd conquered one smart home at a time. The company was now worth over $120 million, and we were expanding internationally. Jennifer knocked on my doorframe. Tyler, the Singapore partnership contracts are ready for your signature. Excellent, I replied, taking the documents. Schedule a call with the Hong Kong distributors for next week. If this expansion goes well, we'll be looking at the Tokyo market by year's end. My phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline read, Former Davis Smart Systems chairman sentenced to 5 years for corporate embezzlement. Bill's criminal trial had concluded exactly as I'd expected. There was a separate article about Brandon Mills, who'd been fired from 2 different companies in the past year for performance issues. Apparently, walking into someone else's empire wasn't as easy as he'd thought. Jennifer set down my afternoon schedule. Your 4 o'clock appointment is here early. Dr. Sarah Williams from the hotel chain. Send her in, I said. And Jennifer, remind me to thank her for staying with us during the transition. Loyalty like that should be rewarded. As Dr. Williams entered my office to discuss expanding our hotel automation systems to her properties in Europe, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed. A year ago, I was the unappreciated son-in-law working in someone else's shadow. Today, I was the sole owner of an international technology empire. The lesson wasn't lost on me. Bill Davis had spent 30 years building a small company and nearly destroyed it through greed and poor judgment. In 1 year of focused leadership, I transformed it into something he never could have imagined. My personal life had improved just as dramatically. Without the constant stress of family politics and unappreciated effort, I'd rediscovered my passion for innovation and growth. I'd started dating again, a brilliant engineer named Amanda who appreciated both my ambition and my integrity. That evening, as I locked up the office, I received one final text from Nicole. I see your success in the news. I'm proud of what you've built. I deleted the message without responding, just as I had all the others over the past year. Nicole had chosen her path when she sat at that dinner table and tried to give away my life's work. I'd chosen mine when I decided that being underestimated was the last mistake anyone would make about Tyler Thompson. The next morning would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new victories. But unlike that terrible night a year ago, I'd face them as the master of my own destiny, answerable to no one but myself and the empire I'd built with my own hands.